Welcome. In this video, I would like to address skills that are useful to all college students. Now, in prior videos, I focused primarily on academic skills. In this video, I'd like to address the life skills that will help you while you're at university. Let's get started. As I was creating this list, I was thinking of what are the skills that I occasionally see missing in some college students' abilities. So I listed them here, and I hope you're going to find them to be useful and as markers of skills that you can develop and improve for yourself. Digital literacy covers a gamut of information related to computer products. But the skills that I often see missing in college students are an ability to connect and properly use a printer, either via a wireless or a USB connection, and the use of external storage devices, primarily for the easy transport of files to and from campus buildings and a dormitory, or in making backups. I think it's also useful to know how to network computers together, either using a wireless connection or an Ethernet connection. And I recommend that students carry an Ethernet cable with them because sometimes Wi-Fi signals on campus can get weak. They can be attenuated by the metal superstructure of buildings. They can also be attenuated by concrete walls. And it's useful to be able to easily plug a laptop into an Ethernet port that's provided either in the dormitory room or at a library carrel, or some classrooms also have Ethernet connections. When it comes to word processing, it's important to realize that Microsoft Word is probably the required word processing software by your American university. This will vary around the world, but in America, every college that I know of requires students to have some degree of facility at the use of Microsoft Word. And papers submitted in response to assignments are normally submitted in Microsoft Word format. For those Mac users, and the Mac computers came with Apple Pages, a competitor word processor, pre-installed. Apple Pages sometimes has a difficult time properly exporting documents in Microsoft Word format, and should a professor return a Word document to a student with reviewer comments typed into the document, those comments sometimes are not visible in Apple Pages. So the students who are using only Apple Pages don't have the ability to get full feedback on their work. And the same applies to Google Docs and other web-based word processors, with the exception of Microsoft Word 365, which is really just a remote version of Microsoft Word. Now, I like Apple Pages, I like Google Docs, and I've used other web-based word processors. They are very convenient, and especially for Mac users, their Apple Pages is free. So these are low-cost alternatives to Microsoft Word, but you still need to be able to open and save and fully access documents that were created in Microsoft Word. So I recommend having facility at the use of Microsoft Word, even if it's not your preferred word processor for personal use. When it comes to processing numbers, students need to have a fundamental degree of expertise at the use of spreadsheets, whether it's Microsoft Excel, Apple Numbers, or Google Sheets. The ability to create a spreadsheet becomes really important in classes that have a mathematical component, such as statistics, and these spreadsheets become really important when creating a budget. And I'll address budgeting in a moment. All right, you know from my prior videos that I am passionate about good writing. So, in writing for academic purposes, it's important to be able to create your academic papers using the required format, which in the United States is usually APA, the American Psychological Association format, and to be able to use formal vocabulary and syntax. The way we write in academics and in business is different than the way we write when we're communicating with friends and family. And that leads me into sending of email messages. When sending an email message, it's important to understand the context, the audience to whom you're sending the email message. If you're writing to your professor, I recommend using a bit more formal language, correct grammar, double check your spelling. If you're sending an email message to a friend or a family member, you have a bit more flexibility because your close acquaintances don't expect perfection in your work in the same way that your professors would. When you're applying for a job or when you're communicating with your employer via email, double check your work. Write in the same formal manner that you would use if you were communicating with your professors. Knowing when to use a text, an audio, or a video communication medium, such as a short message service, commonly known as text messaging, WhatsApp, or the Apple Messages program. You've got to use the medium that's appropriate for the situation. Most people don't like speaking in public. We have a fear, an overwhelming fear of embarrassment, maybe. But speaking in public is a very valuable skill. So it's important that you learn to get those butterflies in your stomach to fly in formation, to keep the emotional response to the fear of public speaking at bay. So practice speaking in your small groups, whether they are learning teams or within the classroom. Share your thoughts and judgments, and be accepting of contradictory information that other people present to you. Think about it. Try to understand why someone has reached a different conclusion than you initially did. Maybe you will stick by your guns and consider yourself right and the other person's judgment wrong, or maybe you'll change your mind. Or maybe you'll just color your judgment a little bit. When you're giving a class presentation or a presentation at work, speak clearly and distinctly. Use sufficient volume so everyone in the audience can hear you. Demonstrate that you are confident in your material, in your knowledge of the material. And that helps the audience to be confident that they should accept the claims and the arguments that you're presenting. When you're interviewing, when you are the interviewee, whether it's for a job or it's for a position within the student government or whenever you're being interviewed, you yourself ask questions. Make sure you understand what that organization desires of the person selected for the position. Make sure that you can show how your skills fit the bill for that position. And it's really helpful to offer examples of practices that you have used, experiences that you have had that will offer value to that organization, whether it's an employer or whether it's a student committee. Regarding self-management, and you know I've addressed this in detail in other videos, but it's really important. Manage your effort carefully. Now, we often call this time management, and I've explained that I really don't think it's possible to manage time, but it's a term that we use and we generally know what it means. So, to effectively manage your efforts, know what is expected of you. Know what commitments you have. Keep a calendar. The calendar should be sufficiently detailed to allow you to know what is on your agenda of requirements for each day. Network with other students. Network with your professors. Cultivate relationships that can be influential to you. But part of that also requires that you keep a current resume. If you don't have a resume now, start writing one as soon as you finish watching this video. List your accomplishments for each of those positions. How did you benefit the organization at which you were working? And remember, working here doesn't have to mean paid employment. It could be working on a committee. Toot your own horn, because nobody else is going to do that. You've got to show what benefit you will offer to the organization because you are bringing these listed specific skills to your application. I mentioned earlier that it's important that you have fundamental skills at the use of a spreadsheet. Okay, in that spreadsheet, maybe the first spreadsheet you create for yourself is a personal budget. And always remember, you don't get to keep all the money you earn at a job. There's gross income and there's net income. Net income is after you have paid your taxes or any other required fees. And this is just my personal advice. Save 20% of your net income. So if you earn $1,000 in a month and you pay, let's see if I can do some math in my head. If you earn $1,000 gross income and you pay 10% of that in taxes, then you should be saving $180. When you go to buy things, compare their cost based on unit cost. I don't buy things based on brand names or directly from advertising. I always try to buy products that we want by comparing their cost to competitor products, and then I buy the one that has the same quality, same product standards, but might cost less per unit. And work on your credit now, whether you be really careful of credit cards. I don't advise against credit cards, but I advise against having too many credit cards. Like 1 or 2 might be sufficient for an individual. And pay those outstanding balances off before the end of the period. Now, pay them off right before the end. I mean, go ahead, float them. If you have a 30-day grace period before the payment is due, go ahead, hold on to your money for 25 or 26 days and then pay the bill. But don't allow interest to accrue from period to period. All right. Learn to cook, just a little bit. You don't have to be a chef, but you can't go through life reheating pizza in a microwave oven. And by the way, if you're going to reheat pizza, do it in a toaster oven. It tastes way better than it does coming from a microwave. And have a signature meal that you're known for. Learn to make one entree and one dessert really well that you and your friends and your family enjoy eating. For example, I'm famous for my homemade rye bread. And when it comes to physical cleanliness other than your body, dust your property. If you live in a dorm room, dust it. If you live in an apartment or you're renting a house, it's going to require a fair amount of vacuuming and dusting, probably at least once a week, but likely you're going to have to run the dust cloth around every other day. And unless you've got a robot vacuum, that vacuum doesn't push itself. So get a little bit of exercise, play some upbeat music, and run the vacuum around for a few minutes. All right. When it comes to thinking, learn to recognize when your emotions are affecting your judgments. We are, by nature, as humans, we are emotional beings, and our emotions affect our thinking process. That's fine. But when it comes to your formal work, your academic work, your employment work, learn to recognize your biases and that other people have experiences that are different than yours. So based on their experiences, their biases can very often contradict yours. And that's okay. Learn to work with that. Maybe you can learn something from other people's biases. Your view of the world is relative to the experiences that you have had. So my view of the world will be different than yours. And that's natural. Just recognize that the views we have are an amalgam of the experiences that we've had. And when you're presenting your formal arguments in class in particular, be disinterested in the outcome. Now, disinterested doesn't mean to not be interested. It means that you are not beholden to the outcomes of your arguments. You are presenting them in a logically complete, precisely worded manner, but it's going to be okay if your audience doesn't accept the propositions that you make in your arguments. So speaking of arguments, always remember to be unemotional in your arguments. Yes, times will come, sometimes in a public speaking course, where you will be asked to present an emotional argument, but that's okay. That's a particular assignment, and usually the professor in that course is trying to demonstrate the limitations that come from emotional argumentation. So, yeah, don't get your heart tied up in the arguments that you make in class. Be willing to change your mind based on new information, and always go into your research process without a conclusion in mind. Go into your research process with questions and then seek to find answers from the empirical data that you acquired during your research. And this applies also when having arguments in class. Now, remember, I'm using that word argument in not as disagreement, not as a fight, but as a way of presenting a claim and defending it with appropriate evidence. So that word argument has two meanings, but argument, as I'm using the word now, is a academic process. It's a means of presenting a claim with appropriate evidence in defense of that claim. All right. Pay attention to what's going on in the world. Be aware of the larger world around you. And be very aware that in news reporting, every news source is biased in one sense or another, or toward one position or another. And some news sources are more biased than others. So I suggest always having access to a newspaper of record. In the United States, that's the New York Times. In Germany, it was the Frankfurter Allgemeine. And just these newspapers tend to be less biased than many other newspapers. I didn't say that they're unbiased, but they're less biased than other newspapers. And the same is true for video news or audio news services. I pay attention to what takes place on what is reported by NPR, National Public Radio, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune. I also pay attention to contradictory information that is presented with a different bias by Fox News and other very conservative news sources. I look to seek to understand what is being said about world events, not just from a single source, but I give preference to the information presented in the newspapers of record. But also, read your campus newspaper. Know what's going on at your university. Sometimes it's fun to just look to see when your friends have been noted in an article in the newspaper, and then celebrate with them. And if you're at a residential college, read the local town newspaper also. Usually there's a business newspaper that's published for free in town. There might also be a general newspaper that's published for free. If not for free, then read the copy that's available at the local coffee shop. But know what's going on around your campus and around the world. Take care of your health, both your physical health and your mental health. As a student, you will probably spend a fair amount of your weekdays sitting still in class. You can't get around that. So try to add some physical activity to each day's schedule so that you don't spend the majority of your time sitting still. If you're sexually active, practice safe sex always. Follow the guidelines from the wellness center, from your physician, from your family. And if you have a health concern, share it with your partner. This is not the time to clam up and not talk about health issues. If you are sexually active, you need to be talking with your partner so that you can feel comfortable and you can protect yourself and help your partner protect themselves. When it comes to your mental health, take time to relax. Recognize when you're feeling stressed and seek to mitigate the effects of the stress. Stress is a natural human reaction, but while it can help us improve our performance in the moment, it's generally not good for our long-term health. So you need to be able to relax and balance that stress that naturally occurs. And develop supportive friendships that will help you feel good about yourself. All right. When it comes to backup plans, I'm using this word backup in two different contexts. One, kind of have these emergency plans. Who are you going to call if you have a roadside breakdown? Will you call your auto insurer? Will you call a private service such as AAA? When it comes to health, make sure you know your primary care physician's phone number. You know the phone number of your campus wellness center. And that you know where the local urgent care centers are around your campus. Now, your wellness center will probably be your primary source of medical assistance during the day. But what about in the evening or on the weekend? Do you know where you could go to get some, like I used to call this emergency care, but it's now called urgent care. Do you know where to go? I'm going to use that word backup in a different context. So rather than emergency plans, I want you to back up your data, and I'm going to propose a new rule, the 4-3-2-1 rule. And you can call it Dave's backup rule if you want. Have at least 3 backups of every data file. So I am not counting the copy of the file that's stored on your laptop. There's 3 more in addition to that, and I'm going to suggest 4 more. 3 backups of every file in at least 2 physically separate locations, one of which is off-site. Easiest off-site service right now is to back up to a cloud service, such as Google Drive or Dropbox, or well, there are lots of them. I don't want to recommend any one in particular. And keep 1 more copy. So most experts recommend 3-2-1, 3 copies of backups. I'm going to recommend 4 copies, 4 backups in addition to the one that's stored on the storage medium of your laptop. And it's really important because you're going to need to be connected to the internet most of the time when you're using a computer or your tablet. Know where you can find Wi-Fi access. So on campus, you probably have Wi-Fi access in your classroom, in the common areas, in your dormitory room. But what are you going to do if campus Wi-Fi is down for maintenance? Just know where these hotspots are. They're usually in coffee shops. They're usually in public libraries. Yeah. And this varies in different parts of the country. I know in Europe, we could find hotspots all over most major cities. And that's not quite as common in the United States, but I do know of a few US cities that have public Wi Fi available in parks and in other commercial districts. What advice do you have for students? What skills do you think are important for all college students that will help those students both at school and later in life? Share your comments down below this video so that we can use the commenting feature of the YouTube videos as a way of teaching one another. I hope you found my list of skills to be interesting, and I hope you agree with me. But if you don't, please share your thoughts in the comments. I am perfectly fine listening to arguments that contradict my points. The skills you can learn, the skills that you can develop at college really can help you for the rest of your life. And until we meet again in a future video, I wish you the absolute best in all of your academic work and in developing lifelong skills. Bye for now. Mika, yeah, you're liking today's walk, aren't you? You kind of like walking early in the morning when it's still kind of dark out here. You look good wearing your flashing red lights. You're a happy dog, aren't you? Oh, was that a squirrel? Maybe. I love you. I hope you have a good day.